Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Benjamin. I'm the VP of Marketing at LeaseCake, and we thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We're here to talk about navigating acquisitions with effective due diligence. And before I pass it over to the speakers to introduce themselves and get started, just a few housekeeping notes. We are recording this, and I'll be sharing it out with everyone in case you care to listen again or listen in the future. And if you have any questions at any point, there's two ways you can ask them. You can use the chat function and send them over that way, or you can just use the Q&A, and we will be keeping an eye on those. So feel free to ask at any point. We would love for this to be interactive, so don't be shy with your questions. And of course, there will definitely be time at the end for Q&A. So with that, I will pass it over to Taj.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate that. Did you let everyone know where the restrooms are? I think just down the hallway around the corner. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that works.
Sounds good. Well, we're really excited to bring to you a great speaker, a great company that's all about savvy transactions and how to navigate acquisitions with efficient due diligence. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest. We are LeaseCake Live. This is a webinar series, and what we're focused on is education. We like to bring best-in-class thought leadership in ways to help the industry, restaurants and service-based retail. Our mission as a real estate and location management platform for this industry is so essential, especially as the market's gotten so much more competitive, challenges with labor and food costs and the like. And certainly there's consolidation in the industry with larger operators starting to buy up smaller operators and smaller operators looking to grow and buy larger operators. So there's so much dynamics in the marketplace, and we're here to make it easy because that's why we're called LeaseCake. So my name's Taj Adhav, and I'm the founder of LeaseCake 6 years ago, started this journey, and it's been incredibly rewarding because we build solutions around real problems that the industry faces. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome C-Squared Advisors, entrepreneur, real estate expert, advisor for the industry, Pete DeFilippo. Pete.
Taj, thank you very much. Thanks. Appreciate you and Michelle having me today, and look forward to a good half hour, 45 minutes of some interactive discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we met Pete, gosh, what, 2-3 years ago? I think it's at an industry event.
Yeah, it's been a few years now, actually. Probably up in Foxwoods. I think you and I met for the first time several years ago.
Oh, yes. The Foxwoods Casino.
Yeah, I believe we were at a DDIFO event for the Duncan Franchisee Association.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at us now. I'm here to make you famous. So
well, I appreciate that. And certainly you guys over the years have been a great partner, but certainly your company has really grown leaps and bounds. And you've done a lot of amazing things for a lot of clients out there, and sky's the limit, obviously. But thank you guys again for having me today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Happy to get you in front of our audience. We've got tons of listeners coming in. It might be standing room only, but I think we've got folks from all over the US and even in parts of Canada. So really excited about sharing your story. And why don't we do that? But first, you got to tell us, where were you when this picture was taken?
I was in Hartford, Connecticut at my at a baptism, and this was a couple of years ago. So it was an honor to be there, and took a picture there with the family, and they selected this one. So
very nice, very nice. It always starts with a story. So why don't you take it away? Tell us your background, things you do, things you don't do, and fascinate us.
Well, I appreciate it. So sitting in cold Rhode Island, had a nice little snowstorm yesterday, but grew up in the Northeast, specifically Rhode Island, small state in the Union, and started my career many years ago in banking. So I worked with several financial institutions, background corporate banking, structured finance, some specialty lending groups, precious metals, and then found my way into the franchise area years back, and really, really enjoyed it. Incorporated everything that I really liked about banking, acquisition finance, dealing with people, structuring deals, working on solutions. And, it's been a really good run. And then, I think I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit in me and, wanted to branch out and leave corporate America a few years back. And I had the opportunity to join a small boutique investment banking firm, C Squared, where we've got 6 really, really good, smart partners. And, it's been a really it's been an enjoyable run. And also what I do, I like to travel. And anyone who knows me, who's seen me out, they see me on the road as a road warrior. So love traveling and meeting with people, and enjoy the dining experience, learning about people and trying to help people.
Yeah, it's funny just seeing how you interact with all different sizes of companies and different levels of leadership within those companies. You've got a certain style, because it's a relationship business, isn't it?
Oh, it's definitely a relationship business, and you have to really like people in order to do what I do. I mean, there's nothing better than meeting good people on the road. And there's a lot of people that we see all the time, and there's people that you have to deal with. But for the most part, people are really enjoyable. I love people. I love learning about them, spending some time with them, and that's just who I am. Some people find it hard to do, and I just really enjoy it. Love making new relationships with people.
Absolutely. Well, it is all about trust, and you've done a phenomenal job with, the people that you surround yourself with and the company that you hold. Talk to us a little bit about, what C Squared Advisors is and what they do. It's a pretty big oversight in helping your customers.
Yeah, I mean, C Squared Advisory Firm. I joined a few years back. It was launched, I believe, in like 2016. And it's an independent boutique investment banking firm. We offer, financial and transaction advisory services with franchisors and franchisees on the buy side, sell side, refranchising, recapitalization of transactions. And we concentrate in the restaurant industry. More specifically, we do a lot of work in the QSR industry. It's a very versatile firm. We've got 3 former bankers. We've got 3 former CPAs. We've got people who worked at brands, Wendy's, Dunkin', and most recently, we've just added a 7th person who's a junior person who's going to do a lot of our analytical work, and we've got really high hopes for him. His name's Jack. So we try to work with clients and maximize their value for our clients and do the right thing and be completely transparent. So I think that's a lot of what we do, and who we are as a firm. We try to, we want to make our clients successful. And in order to do that, what we offer, we have a little bit different approach. We do a full analytical valuation for them to make sure that there's a common ground that we have. We do that for free. We evaluate what they're doing, whether we're doing a sell side, a buy side, or doing a bank recapitalization. We want to make sure that it's a fit. And if we feel that there's a fit and a really good solution, we'll take on that engagement. So I think that's one of the unique things that we offer, is that transparency. And it's not just, it's an important event for the client. And we want to make sure that we can be successful and they can be successful.
Sure. Well, we touched on relationships, but it's trust, right? It's trust in the company that a buyer or seller is working with, but it's also trust that the transaction is clean, right? The transaction is smart and the transaction moves fast. How important is the level of effort for due diligence in whether you represent buyers or sellers?
I believe it's critical. I mean, having that preparation, being prepared, in all aspects, whether it's C Squared doing it, whether it's LeaseCase doing it, whether it's the client getting prepared, ready to sell their business, and even if they're looking for new capital, it's probably the most important feature out there. We want to make sure that everyone is prepared and has everything in order, and that really helps out any type of transaction you do. If you know a lot of the questions going in, if you know what the objective is to make sure that you have the tools necessary upfront that you're working on to make it successful.
Yeah, that's right. Well, one of the themes that we've seen and witnessed firsthand is the amount of private equity institutional capital that's coming into the market, whether it's restaurants or service-based retail. are there any kind of either war stories that you can share, things that happened over a weekend with a spreadsheet, or you want to touch on that? Because I mean, these are pretty sizable transactions that are very dependent on not only all the other financial due diligence, but the real estate due diligence.
Yeah, and I think, Taj, when you're looking at a transaction of any size, right, you want to be prepared. You want to make sure, let's just use the example that we're selling something for a client. That's a huge event in their lifetime. And you want to make sure that everything is in order for that franchisee who's selling. Because again, their whole lifetime in many cases is evolving before them. It's an emotional decision to try to get your network ready to sell. And sometimes they have that hard separation because a lot of the franchisees who've been it their whole entire life are known as that person in that franchise. So when you've got a private equity firm coming in, they're going to do their diligence. And our job is to get them prepared, to make sure that they have the tools necessary to make it a smooth transaction. Because again, a lot of times, transactions have their ups and downs. But I think when you can get two parties that really have a good understanding of what the objective is, and to have a matchup and have everything, it shows the firm coming in to buy it saying, hey, these guys got their stuff going on. They really have they're in control of all of their deliverables, whether it be financial statements, whether it be having a law firm representing them, whether they have their leases in order, such as, and I know a firm that they could probably use that would do a great job doing that. But all little things, having contracts in place, having their assets ready, up to date, in order, those things all matter. And I think a lot of times people kind of overlook them and say, okay, we can kind of fly by the seat of our pants and, do it as we go. But in reality, it starts long before the discussion of let's go out to market with the deal. Let's make sure we have everything in order and set expectations. And again, I think the buyer coming in who's going to invest, quite a bit of money, has a lot more comfort when they know things are at their fingertips and we have them already waiting for them. Makes a deal a lot easier to go through.
Yeah. Well, you talk about being prepared, and, as a seller looking to, looking for buyers, what's the suggested or best advice from a timeline perspective if they have a time horizon? Is it 1 year, 2 years? Is it 1 month, 6 months? What have you seen and what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think there's initial upfront time where someone's making that decision. But eventually, I mean, could a transaction happen in 90 days? I think if everything matched, it could. But typically, there's that due diligence period. It's preparation of all the materials, whether it's from us or whether it's from them collectively. Anywhere from that 90 to really 180 plus days. Sometimes there's extenuating circumstances where things take a little bit longer, but obviously, the normal transaction is it's always a good 6 months, whether it's, from starting today and preparing the materials and getting everything ready. And, timing's also critical, right? We've seen a couple, last couple of years have been very challenging. And, I think there's been people out there who want to sell their business, but, obviously the economics of it haven't really cooperated over the last couple of years, given all the, the factors in the industry. So, a good transaction, that 6 month period is probably a fair timeline. And obviously it's plus or minus, it takes a special one with a lot of things aligned to close it sooner. Because again, once you get everyone to agree upon everything, you also have to have the brand agree. So we want to make sure that the people who are vetted that are coming in are brand approved.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So when you say brand, working with the franchise system, there are transfer fees, right, that are imposed on the seller. Sometimes they're split between the buyer and the seller. Do you want to touch on that? Is there a support system that's in place to help facilitate the ease of that and making transfer fees a little bit less financially painful?
Yeah, I think again, when we're doing the homework and we kind of get all things aligned and see what the fees might potentially be, you want to set expectations on the negotiation part of it, Taj. I think that's very important that, when you are negotiating certain documents and in the APA and whatnot, you got to make sure that everyone's aligned. And it's not always the easiest thing to do. you kind of have to pick and choose your battles of what are the most important things to you or that seller are, and certainly align that with the buyer's expectations are too. And I think a lot of times is if you can get common ground on what the most important things are, you can kind of set that expectation beforehand. And then again, if a franchise fee comes up, whether it's splitting it, whether it's one taking on the whole entire obligation, I think you're ready to discuss that.
Yeah. So as Michelle said at the outset of this session, it's very interactive. Feel free to use the chat. We actually are seeing some questions come across. So if you don't mind, Pete, we're just going to answer a few of them here on the fly. As it relates to, this might be putting you on the spot, but as it relates to, some of the specifics, because you talked about what's the priority and how do you prioritize what's important for the seller and for the buyer. What are some of the examples of critical clauses or some of the gotchas that you want to make certain are fully vetted before, a sale or an acquisition? You have any example critical clauses or terms?
Yeah, I think one that comes up very often is, the remodel fees. What's the level of expectations on remodel fees? Because obviously, if you've got a large, robust network, you could have a lot of remodels coming up. And the expectation for the seller is, hey, I'm selling my network, they should be able to buy it. Well, the reality of it is, there's a heavy investment that someone's coming in to buy that network. And you want to make sure that, they're properly aware of, hey, you've got 4 or 5 coming up this year. It's a substantial investment. It's kind of on you at this point. So you've really got to, discuss that one. That one seems to come up all the time too.
Yeah.
Another critical one is, this is kind of right up your alley too. It's the leases. What are the clauses? Have you done your homework on the leases? And obviously subject matter experts like you and Lease Cake, are a great resource for that. One that we certainly rely on because of the level of expertise and experience that you guys have, that, you really discuss that with the client. So everyone knows exactly, what clauses are in there, whether they're expiring. And obviously, if someone's coming in to buy, they want to know when their leases are terminated. So you want to make sure that's in there. And certainly, if there's any escalation clauses for a sale. So those are two that come up quite often. And they can be big factors too. And again, there's a cost involved, but obviously you've got to prepare your the seller and the buyers for what the numbers of the transaction are.
Yeah, there are a ton of gotchas, and you mentioned the easy ones, right? Renewal options.
Yeah, I mean, they're easy.
Those are done. Expirations, rent steps, but we've seen stories where there's a condition for a sale, right, for the lease to be assigned to a new buyer.
Right.
Well, the landlord's got to be notified. And for the landlord to be notified, they know that, hey, something's afoot. Should I get a piece of the action on the transaction?
Well,
and so make it a little bit more onerous for that seller to to renegotiate and try to put it in the best hands of a potential buyer. So sometimes the buyer's taking on more risk, or the seller ultimately could get harmed because of some of those transfer notices.
No question about it. I mean, that happens more than you would you choose to. So and again, I think another kind of gotcha is it's vendor contracts. What obligations have they gone into contract with, and that the new buyer has to take over. So I think there's a lot of cases that there's any number of cases. Those are those are ones that are readily apparent. I also think it's fully incumbent upon people to have good representation too. I mean, all too often having the right attorney in the situation really also helps prepare to the team of people who are getting ready to sell your network too, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate the questions coming in. We'll get to them here one at a time, but you did touch on vendor contracts. So I'm going to transition to this next slide, the impact of due diligence. It's certainly not just the real estate and your real estate leases, but we've had new buyers of, massive amounts of locations, going from, let's say, 15 locations to suddenly 70. And while the transaction is, all set to go, the amount of effort to reassign those vendor contracts, sometimes it's often overlooked how like, oh, it should be relatively straightforward to change it out, to change the systems, to change the parties to those vendor contracts. I mean, is that what you're touching on? Is that what you're
There's no question about that. We're actually going through a situation with that right now too, and it's a rather extensive list of contracts in place, or even those unwritten contracts that are out there too. That long-term relationship. You and I have been doing business for a long time. Might not be written down, but obviously the expectations are there that it's going to continue. And if someone comes in with another network that they need to incorporate some of these things, you've really got to kind of put that list in front of them and saying, these are the contracts that we have. These are the ones that we've already paid for, that we have they're in there for a number of years. And then these are the ones that people we've been dealing with for years. So you obviously want to make sure that there's no overlap. And if there's overlap, then there's, potential room for, aggravation or some type of, anxiety with both parties. So it's very meaningful. And then, again, it's one of those things on the due diligence things that you really just need to look at. And sometimes it goes unnoticed, but it really is, and obviously as you get closer to finalizing the transaction, you need to know that because it could be a substantial investment that you aren't aware of. And that could certainly alter the price.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's right. I mean, we didn't even talk about the obvious one, right? You have
Right.
a pre-negotiated deal, this is the cost per unit once you pass due diligence. So why don't you touch on that? I mean, after a 6-month process, have you seen significant changes in the price that's pre-agreed upon, or deals that have completely fallen through?
Sure, and I would think certainly we've seen a lot of that in the last couple of years too. Obviously, we always say in this industry, time kills deals, and again, it's being part of that preparation. You want to make sure that everyone has everything in order, because that does help facilitate things. Then clearly, the seller, and his team have to keep the eye on the ball, because again, if it takes you 6-7 months, someone's going to want to see the financial performance of the company, 6-7 months down the road, to make sure it's what their expectations were when they, submitted that LOI for the initial purchase price. So if you've got a declining economy, if certainly what we've had in the last couple of years with the higher labor costs, food costs, inflationary costs, banking costs, combine all those together. And if you're not performing properly, expectations are when we get to the finish line that, hey, I want to, make sure that I see the financial performance of the company to make sure everyone's running through the tape. And that goes down a lot. It could certainly impact the valuation. And, that does become a huge issue.
Yeah. Well, it probably justifies having an industry checklist, right? Common due diligence items to really look for when you're contemplating selling or buying. So we will work on that. I think we do have several case studies and I guess papers on some of those key steps. So we'd love to get your help on and potentially even refining them.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some of the obvious ones, right? You've got to make sure that you've got financial statements and history of those financial statements. Those are obviously very important, whether it be tax returns, CPA audit, review, compilation, whatever they are. You want to make sure you have your franchise agreements in place, in order, especially if it's a QSR or any other system that's owned by a franchisor. Obviously, your contracts, again, we already touched on that, how important it is, but it's good to have those in a place where they're readily available. You want to have your leases available, and if they're not, you need to get them in order. And certainly, I know a firm that I could refer them into. That might be a LeaseCake company, but I mean, those are some of the obvious things. You want to make sure the condition of your assets are up to par. I mean, all of those things matter, and that all contributes to a smooth process, or be a tough process in the negotiations. So I think having that that basic checklist of things is it's fundamental. So I think, again, there's a lot more other things. Again, having that good team of advisory people around you, a lease company, an attorney, to really see all, an advisory firm, to have all the tools in your belt in order to come to the table. And when you're being prepared, obviously it helps for a smoother transaction, because again, in this industry, there's a lot of uncertainty a lot of times, and the more things that you have being prepared for, and I keep stressing that, it does make a difference.
Yeah, clean, smart, fast deals, right? Like you said, you've got to make sure that the deal is clean. You're well prepared. All the documents are in order. Everything has been scrubbed and vetted, because the last thing you want to do is spend 4 to 6 months getting down to that finish line and having something disrupt, that deal, whether it falls off or it substantially changes it. The smart factor is making certain that you're one step ahead, right? You want to anticipate what that buyer is looking for. So having all of your ducks in a row, and then the fastest deals obviously win. We've got
And it sounds so easy 101, but in reality, it doesn't work that way. There's missing documents, there's missing agreements, there's missing financials, there's this and that. And, that contributes to the challenges of executing a deal. But
Yeah.
I think the more people have a lot of those things in order, ready to go prior to the transaction going out to market, it definitely makes for a better, quicker, smoother, faster transaction. And again, it gives the buyer a lot more confidence that, hey, the seller has everything at their fingertips and really is giving me those tools necessary to do my due diligence. Because again, typically a lot of these transactions are really big investments, and it's very critical that everything is at their fingertips, so nothing's being hidden.
Yeah. So you touched on three really important things, and we can talk about it at length. But I think one is franchise agreements. What we've seen is you've got to make sure that those franchise agreement expirations happen either coterminous with the lease, but you certainly don't want the lease to be ending prior to a franchise agreement expiring, because that would be a big problem. And then the others are just related to having everything in order. I mean, one of our biggest value adds is never lose track of your stuff again. That was one of our taglines. Just everything you talked about, having a system of record that people can rely on, and it's all in one place. The few examples that we can share with you here, I can share with you, publicly. I won't say who the names are, but fascinating that we've had customers on our platform, and they are acquiring a whole 10 units, 20 units of a complementary brand. And when we find out that the buyer is also on our platform, you talk about a clean, smart, fast deal. The buyer and the seller we're overjoyed because it happened right before Christmas. I think it was like 2022. And that's where there's less risk, because here's what's the impact of good proper due diligence on M&A. It's when your stuff's all organized, the confidence grows, the buyer's confidence grows. And the last piece is lenders. We haven't really talked about that because they're obviously should be a big part. Most likely they're a big part of a buyer acquiring. So I think you kind of want to keep your lenders happy as well, because they're the ones that are backing the transaction.
No question about it. I mean, you touched on it too, having them, coterminous, it's really an important factor on the banking side. That's the one uncertainty there is out there a lot of times with these transactions. It's, getting the proper financing in order. It's a huge component, and it can kill deals, but it can also make a deal nice and smooth, especially if there's a good financial business partner out there. And again, that feeds into the being prepared. The bank is a lot more comfortable too when you're delivering documents that they've asked for in a really timely manner. And if there are any discrepancies, you have subject matter expertise on delivering, what that reconciliation might need to be. So very, very underrated, but certainly important, critical factor in the M&A process.
Yeah, we've heard of stories, and not that there's anything wrong with this. A lot of the new customers that come to us, they oftentimes beat themselves up and they're embarrassed to say, "Oh man, we run a spreadsheet," or "You see that binder up on a shelf there? It's collecting dust." Yeah, that's our lease and location management system. And obviously, it's not much of a system, but that shows the value of making certain that it's accessible to multiple parties. Not just the ones that are important to the transaction or a company like yours at C Squared Advisors, but having it available to everyone that can make certain that the deal happens smoother, whether it's vendor contracts and legal
Tosh,
team.
a lot of these people who are selling their networks too, they're small business owners, really. They may not have the capabilities of the team around them to kind of provide them that advice and whatnot, that expert advice from really good business partners. And, again, I think that's why they reach out to firms like ours who provide that. Obviously, there's some really, really dedicated attorney firms out there. There's firms like yourselves who have all done transactions in the past and can really instill those values to these people who are, getting ready to make a lifetime decision. So it's critically important. But again, the bigger franchisees or the private equity firms or family office firms coming into the system, they have the expertise at their fingertips. But a lot of these sellers are small business owners, and it's up to us to kind of provide them that information. So.
Yeah. And then as it relates to finding buyers, I mean, is that your job?
In many cases, they'll come to a firm like C Squared, where we have, 6 or 7 professionals who all have, pretty diverse backgrounds and resources, and our own kind of networks that we deal with. So many times is the obvious people that are looking to buy. But then there's the people who we've dealt with over the years, or, constantly we're on the road who, hey, we're interested in this, we're interested in that. And, we'll put that list together and we'll prepare that, and, we'll share that with obviously our client. And, that's how we kind of cast our marketing efforts.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And we'll touch on that here, coming up in a little bit.
And again,
So,
Todd, I think a lot has to do with, having such a diverse team that we have, of the professionals on our team and the depth. It's just not 1 or 2 individuals. It's a complete team effort every time we go out to marketplace.
yeah, yeah. Well, we talked about confidence, we talked about relationships, we talked a little bit about trust. How do you build trust with a buyer and between a buyer and a seller?
I think again that transparency and communication. Obviously, if they see that you've got your house in order, that you're delivering the deliverables, I think there's a way to go about it too. Again, good communication often is overlooked, and I think that really can help the process with that transparency. And I think if you set the expectations and if you're honest about things and there's no critical mistakes that you're not showing, I think that goes a long way in kind of helping people kind of get over any potential uncomfortable situations you might have. It definitely makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, and there's a term that maybe, several of us have heard here that are listening live, is begin with the end in mind. When you enter into the world of franchising and you say, man, I really want to open up, 1 location of this brand, and before you know it, it just starts to click and you open 3 and 5 over time. And you've probably seen this, Pete, where 10, 20 years go by, and then there's, who's going to take over? How will this legacy continue? So it's like beginning with the end in mind is going to be really important as it relates to, that plan, right? That plan to exit. So have you seen sellers, kind of proactively really thinking about this well in advance, or is it kind of all of a sudden they just wake up and say, oh man, I'm done. I want to try to maximize the value I've created. My kids don't want to run the business anymore. I mean, what have you seen?
Yeah, I think probably a mixed bag, but I think there's a lot of that spontaneous thing. They've been thinking about it for a while, really haven't done anything about it. They don't have anyone to give it to. And I think a lot of major brands are undergoing this. There's, that generation that's just ready to kind of sell their business and walk away. And they've been doing it for a long time. And the next generation is just really not interested in the industry. So there's, depends on the level of sophistication. Again, I think the bulk of it in many, many, many major systems out there, that there's a lot of smaller networks, smaller business people. And this has been a lifestyle for a lot of them. So I don't think a lot of them have had that proper planning, and, maybe their bookkeeping, record keeping of where they, put everything together just hasn't been, up to par. So I think, again, it depends on the situation, but there's a lot of people who just decide, you know what, I'm ready, it's time, let's hire someone to sell. So again, I think, if we can get to these people prior to them really wanting to sell, and really, having that discussion up front, when they're starting to think about the process, it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this topic here in particular, it's like kind of like buying or selling your own home, right? I mean, do you hire a professional, or do you say, you know what, there's services out there, I'm part of an association, I'm just going to talk it up and find some potential, buyers. You
Nope.
probably have a strong opinion on this.
Yeah, we do. I mean, obviously, look, an advisory firm has a lot of benefits. And for those who, need our services, and any, of the people out there in the industry, it makes a big difference. how many people can go about just selling their business? There's a few people that I'm sure they can do that. But again, I think, to maximize that, it's a lifetime liquidity event. And do you want to half step it, or do you really want to do it the right way and do your diligence? No different than a house, right? Are you going to have someone come in and just, fix the things, or are you going to do it right? And I think that has a lot to do with it. Firms like ours, they really help you get prepared and, try to maximize your value. And again, if that's what you're looking for. Now, look, it's not for everybody, because there are certain firms out there who are very, very large networks that are out there large, that they have the ability to, sell on their own. But I think for that small business owner, for that medium size, for that unsophisticated, not unsophisticated, but, not, it's not something that they regularly do. It can be very overwhelming and challenging. And again, to have that proper team around you, it helps make things easier, smooth the transition. And again, the goal for a seller is to maximize the liquidity event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you seeing franchisors starting to buy up? And it may depend brand by brand, smaller operators, for them to kind of consolidate and package up to find new buyers?
Yeah, I think we're doing a few, we're seeing a few things out there. One of the trends in the marketplace, and I think, we'll see this in 2024 as well. We're going to start to see some, some franchisors will probably start to either buy some of the weaker franchisees, or start to shutter some of those stores and allow some closures. Because again, a franchisor wants to maximize the health of their system. And whether it's buying someone who's troubled, or kind of jettisoning some of the lower performing assets in order to prepare to have higher producing assets. I think we'll see that a little bit more. But I think it does make sense in situations where, hey, you don't want your brand having too many challenges. So I think the more upfront they are and ahead of the game, I think it's obviously going to help the entire industry. And again, that also translates into banking too, because I think, banks want to see overall health of an industry. And the weakness, it hurts. But obviously, kind of correcting that weakness and trying to get everyone on the right trajectory is definitely beneficial for not only the franchisee, the franchisor, and the financial system.
Yeah, that's really good to know. There's a couple questions coming in as it relates to negotiating. I was wanting to come to this slide so we can get to the topic. So the question came in that says, hey, we're working with an advisory firm, and I feel like they might be missing some questions that they really should be asking a buyer to maximize the value. Any negotiating tips that you could share that really should be asked or avoided?
I mean, I think one of the most important things is being transparent. I think that just has such a big role in, that open communication with negotiations. You can't win on every issue. Sometimes you have to say, okay, what is the most important thing to you? What are the most important things to you? And if we're negotiating, you can't win on, if there's 15 issues out there, a buyer's probably not going to let you win on 15. So you want to find what the common ground is, what the most important things are for the seller and the buyer, and to really work on those things that are most important. And I think if you can accomplish the bigger tasks first, it makes it easier for the smaller tasks.
Well said. It's kind of one of the universal rules, right? To get stuff done, you focus on the tough things first, because a lot of people do it the other way around. It's like, oh, let me do the easy stuff. And then before you know it, the big stuff, there's very little time in the day, you're backed up against a deadline. That's wonderful. So it's prognostication time, Pete. And, 2023 was wild. I don't think it's going to calm down in any regard, but what do you think is coming up next for 2024? What are the things to watch for?
Great question. Well, obviously it's, we're in a presidential year right now. So, I think people are kind of holding their breath a little bit on what's going to happen. And, that always brings about some uncertainty. So I think, our rate's going to go down. Who's going to be the next president? What's the tax base look like? I mean, all those things matter when it comes to a liquidity event. And if you're thinking about selling your business. So I think those things are kind of top of mind right now. But then again, we also have come off, kind of a roller coaster the last couple of years where you've had, inflation, higher interest rates, food costs, labor costs, the challenges there. All of those things are still out there. Maybe not as apparent, maybe we've seen some correction on some of those key items. But I think those things are all, they're all kind of loom, in the background as well. And I think, AI is out there too, right? What can franchisees do to, improve their operations without hiring new people? And I think there's new things in the marketplace that are really helping. And I think, we'll see a lot of that activity happen. And again, we're looking forward to a more robust year with M&A activity. Banks have been a little challenged over the last year and a half too. I think they'll start to lend a little bit more, which will, increase the activity in the space.
Okay. So that's a good recap. Do you see that consolidation will continue?
Yeah, I think that's just part. I just think that's a part of business that's going to continue going forward as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new players in the industry who, have to have a lot of capital to deploy, and obviously, they're looking for a more robust size network or networks and to kind of roll it up. So, I think in some situations it makes a lot of sense. Also, and it still makes sense to have new blood coming into the systems. I think that's really, really important because again, you want to have that next gen of people coming in with the, creative ideas who might be some of the best operators out there. So I think it's a nice mix of both things.
That's good. Very helpful. All right. So, you've had, incredibly rich career experiences, good and bad, like probably most of us. But you've survived. What's the best advice you've ever, received or even the worst?
I can probably tell you the worst advice first, and I think that was earlier in my career, trying to make a quick hit in the stock market and listening to someone without doing my proper due diligence. So there have been a few painful, costly lessons there. So that's probably the worst advice, and the bad.
That's happened to me too. You know what?
It's
Buy high
happened.
and sell low, and then you try to make it up in volume. It just never works.
It never works out that way. But some of the best advice is, and there's a number of things, but nothing substitute how I was brought up, and hard work, conquers a lot of things. If you do the right thing for people, if you treat them right and you treat them the way you expect to be treated, good things will happen. And I live by that. And I know it sounds a little corny, but it's meaningful to me. Is I want to always treat people as best as I possibly can. And if you're not treating people the right way, they're not going to treat you right way back. So I think that's out there too. And then winning alone is great, but nothing substitute winning with the team, because none of us do it on our own. That goes for me, and I'm sure we surround ourselves with good people. And if you surround yourself with good people, they're going to make you look better, and you're going to have more satisfaction winning as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. You surround yourself with people smarter than yourself, and God knows I've got a lot of smarter people around me.
Amen.
Absolutely. No, this is fun. So when we've got a couple more questions that are coming in, we'll save a few minutes here as we round the bend. Let me take a look, make sure we haven't covered them already. So we talked about preparation, people handling M&A on their own, negotiating tactics, trends. I would say the question that I'm trying to figure out how to best frame this, because it has to do with franchisee, franchisor relationships, transactions. Does a franchisee have much strength or power in their negotiating position with a franchisor when they're looking to have that franchisor sell? I mean, this might be a bit contentious, but I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a gray area. Obviously, franchisors have a lot of not power, but they certainly have a lot of things that they have to impose. I would think that the communication with the franchisor is critically important. Again, you have to be prepared, but obviously having a good relationship that's not contentious is definitely more beneficial no matter what. You get a lot more being nice and certainly doing the right things. And I think you probably have a little bit more flexibility. Look, a franchisor, has their rules, and, you kind of have to abide by them. You have to be in compliance with everything. You have to do a lot of things that they require of you. And I think if you're doing that, there's a fair chance there's a little bit more leeway in understanding on certain topics. I mean, that's just an in general question. So, again, I think that's a fair question. It's kind of a tough one to answer on my end. I'm not the franchisor or the franchisee, but I
Yeah.
would always imagine, doing the right thing and having, being in compliance, doing the right thing with the franchisor and abiding by your franchise agreement is probably the most critical thing you could possibly do.
Wonderful. Well, it ties back to everything we talked about in the front end, right? It's a relationship business. There's no such thing as over communicating, and you got to build trust. So, it's wonderful. We're going to continue this theme of Lease Cake Live and education. And Pete, it's been fabulous. We've got a couple of pretty cool webinars coming up, all about efficiency and how it meets expansion. We've got a very prolific and large Little Caesars franchisee across Latin America. We've got a great relationship with Little Caesars corporate, and we've got many of those franchisees in our system within LeaseCake. And then also let's talk about restaurant financial success. This is clearly a key area for how operators can help reduce their tech stack, finding a best-in-class solution with restaurant accounting as an example. And we'll talk about some of the pains and some of the joys of finding a very streamlined solution. So we're looking forward to sharing those in a couple of upcoming webinars on the 21st and the 28th. And we hope you join us. And with that, Pete, man, you and your team have been fabulous. And I definitely, owe you a debt of gratitude for taking up this time to share, all of the learnings with our audience. And again, the recording is going to be available. We'll send it out to all the participants. But again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm humbled.
I appreciate your time, appreciate the partnership, appreciate working with you and the service that you're providing for everyone else and getting some of this messages out there. So thank you, continued success, and thanks for having me today.
You're welcome, Pete. We'll see you in the freezing up north sometime soon.
You'll see me on the road sooner than later.
All right, my friend. You take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.